So in a world where people might be increasingly mean and things are tumultuous and all that, I think it's important to focus on the nice things, people being nice. Like, for
Nice.
example, my sister-in-law the other day found a dog, this absolutely adorable kind of golden retriever pit bull mix thing, maybe. Anyway, found it kind of wandering around without a collar out on Manor Road and took it in. Well, took it into our house, but this dog has actually been a delight. So that was a nice gesture.
Nice. Going into this episode, I was thinking, oh man, I really hope that San Jose game goes well.
Mhm.
And it did. And it gave us stuff to talk about. And I think makes the story
Yeah.
for the rest of the season interesting to talk about and,
Mhm.
a little more nice than the alternative, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was nice of you to cover the recap because I was on
Yeah,
a
my
date
pleasure.
with my wife watching Shaky Graves, which was a nice show out at Radio East, which I think is a nice venue. But my sister-in-law, the dog rescuer, disagreed. She was not as down with Radio East as I was, but I felt it was a nice venue. There was a watch party there earlier this year, obviously. Let's transform. There was not a coven of witches selling things off to the side, which was what the case when the St. Louis Austin match happened, the Azuni goal. I think that was where I see everything originated, which is
Yeah,
one
yeah.
of the nicer observations that Azuni has made about himself, I think.
Yeah, making a Borat style my wife reference. That's nice. I want to
Yeah.
mention
Nice.
another nice thing among nice things. We got a Rodolfo Borrell press conference this week, and
Yeah,
we
that
didn't
was
know if we
nice.
were going to get one, and that was nice. Nice to have something like that as we head into the last quarter of the season, right?
I mean, maybe nicely timed after a win like that. Didn't do it after, say, the Montreal loss, which would have been less nice. And I
Yeah,
imagine the media would have been less nice as a result of
yeah.
that.
One of the things that I like is feeling encouraged to get back into pounding away at the keyboard and actually writing up a piece. It'd been a while, and I wrote something
Mhm.
up in the wake of that San
Nice.
Jose win. It felt nice to de-atrophy those muscles, get back into the swing of
It
things.
was absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And it was nice to edit for change, something that wasn't my own. So that was good. That was nice. It's gonna be nice weather coming up next week.
Yeah,
Lows in the 60s.
not bad. And
Enjoy that. Yeah.
speaking of nice pieces of work, a really nice piece about Owen Wolff and him making the
Thank
leap
you.
and leaps and bounds. We'll talk about it more on the show, but
Yeah.
just felt like that was a good call. You know what else is nice? A
Hmm.
big old LV watch party out at ABW Sprinkle Valley. Lots
Oh
of
yeah, that's a
room,
nice venue.
very kid friendly. There's a playground for the kids, lots of parking, lots of good food. It's nice to
Yeah.
know that you have that kind of thing to look forward to, Phil.
It's a nice spot. Yeah, you can take the whole family. By the way, what episode is this? 69,
69,
dude.
dude.
Excellent!
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, hurry up, shut up, hurry up, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies, all the nice emergencies, all the emergencies here on episode 69, which we are celebrating in our own special way. Moisés, how are you? And how was your very busy week hanging out with Rodolfo Borrell for part of that?
I mean, to continue a theme, nice, nice, nice all around. It's been a busy week, crazy week in so many different respects, but it feels like we have a full bag of stuff to cover,
We do.
much more even than we assumed right on the other side of that San Jose victory that, hit some historical precedents that I think one could say may end up representing a turning point in the Austin San Jose relationship, rivalry, interaction over the history of things. The Nico Estévez definition of the San Jose rivalry, since he got here, things sure have been different, haven't they?
They really have. And Austin 3, San Jose 1, we got two very hilarious goals in there for Austin. One engineered by Osman Bukri and finished by Bruno Wilson. Not a name that you recognize as an Austin player because, of course, that is a San Jose
Hold on,
player.
Phil.
But
Phil,
also,
in the
yes,
same
yes.
way that we say Guilherme Bidu MLS All Star, we've got to say Austin FC legend Bruno Wilson. He deserves it at this point.
But that first goal was, I think, one of my favorite goals in Austin FC history. Just the
Yeah.
weight of that Owen Wolff pass, just the way that transition play started, the way that Wolff was able to engineer that. And then, of course, Bucari not doing the near post thing to get thwarted, taking a beat, making the smart choice, 2Q from his captain, and hitting it far post. Just a beautiful, well-worked goal that was very early in the match, of course, set the tone. Seeing Zuni getting his fourth goal in 6 matches, shall we say nice? Again, a overworked word. It's going to be doing a lot of mileage in this particular episode. It has already, but
we didn't plan it that way. Like, we wanted to just do the intro like that. Turns out we just have a lot of things to classify that way.
Things feel a lot better than they did a game ago. We don't want to be like necessarily buffeted by the winds of, oh, we lost, things are dismaying, or oh, we got to win, things are hopeful and we're gonna win a lot in the playoffs, because again, it is still this kind of weird liminal space that Austin's in, but at the same time, this win does a lot more to help Austin than if they had drawn or lost that match.
And there are a lot of different definitions for momentum, right? There is looking at it from the straight up wins, losses, and that sort of thing. But a thing that I pointed to in the At the Whistle that I wrote up that night is that exact sequence that you mentioned that set the tone for the whole match. That was a definitive diversion from the mean of what the first half had looked like in the previous 3 matches. It began with Nico Dubrsarski dispossessing the ball and leading into that beautiful play in the ways that are tracked on stat sheets. That's what people will focus on, but that's the beginning of that sequence is what I wanted to focus on, because to me, that was the key in defining the momentum that it propelled them through with that game. And as I talked to John Gallagher about in the post-match, when he had to take a seat because he was so exhausted, it really, to me, defined the momentum that they are carrying into this last quarter of the season in terms of, by all appearances, where their heads are, where their mentality is, where their focus is, not the letting themselves getting dispossessed or mistakes that they made land more heavily than they should, and just picking their crap up and continuing on the way that they did in that San Jose game. They did not allow themselves to be phased early, middle, or late in the game even. And that, to me, is what is going to be most crucial going into this last stretch.
And they came out aggressive from the jump, which I thought was really important, because in that Montreal game, the one thing that was really disheartening about that is that they were not that. Montreal got the first 6 shots in the game, as I've talked about before. That to me was just very indicative of the kind of match that Austin was playing. And I don't know if it was the travel or if it was just the drag of losing Copa Tejas and the back-to-back draws against the rivals, just the cumulative effects. They still do have these worrying patches late in the season, where we even saw it in 2022, where they dropped 3 straight matches and it took them a while to actually qualify for the playoffs. Eventually, of course, they were second in the West, but there were some chinks in the armor that were beginning to show at that particular point of the season.
And this is something that will pepper some stuff throughout this, and we'll probably talk a bit more about it in the preview of Sporting Kansas City. But one of the things that Nico mentioned this morning as we record this on Friday in the midweek on a Friday presser was that they cannot give up an entire half of a game like they did in Montreal. They cannot do that for the remainder of the season. And noting that and saying it in as many words, that's something that, you know, I feel like by the time we get to the end of the season, we will not have as many compared to Josh Wolff kind of things to draw comparisons with. But I don't feel like that is the kind of thing that we would get in that public facing interface with the previous coach. And one of the things that and again, we'll get to this in a bit, that I brought up in the Roto presser was that I appreciate the consistency of that communication from the coach. I may not like everything that he says every time. I may know that I'm getting one of the things that he has on speed dial just trotted out time after time. But at the very least, there is that consistency in motivation and owning up to, yeah, that was gross. Yeah, that was beneath our standards. And I feel like in watching the post-match presser, which I wasn't there for because I went straight to the locker room to talk to players, I feel like there is that acknowledgement of, I haven't been saying all season that this is the greatest team in the world and you guys just don't see it. It's that he sees all the work and he knows what these guys are capable of, if only many, many different things break in the right way that are kind of out of control. And just on the night, you can't control the officiating. You can't control somebody suddenly cramping. You can't control somebody suddenly succumbing to overtired daddy brain because they have a newborn. There are some of those things that you can prepare as much as you want for, but on the night, things just need to break your way. And I think that differently than the results broke in the LAFC San Diego match on Sunday night, the complete opposite worked that way for Austin, where
Yeah.
Austin had the San Diego night and not the LAFC night going into this last series of matches, and with not as aggressive of a schedule as an LAFC and as some of these other teams have.
Yeah, so speaking of new dads, and I guess frazzled old dads for that matter, we are a little worse for wear in the Austin FC lineup. Not only do we have all the international players out, which we're going to get to when we get into the SKC preview, but besides Sabovic, a new father who is perhaps feeling the sleep deprivation of being a new father. I've been there. It is real. It is no joke. It is difficult. Although, thanks to my oldest waking up for 2 a.m. feedings, I really got into the South Korea Japan 2002 World Cup, and that fueled my love of soccer immensely and was a very pivotal moment in my soccer fandom. So he apparently is having some issues, and then Ilya is having some issues. So I guess we got to talk about that because the midfield is a lot thinner than we were maybe hoping it would be heading into this match with Danny Pereira already out.
And just for reference, and I know a bunch of people already know this, going into the San Jose match, Ilya was listed on the injury report as being out with back spasm issues. When I talked to him in the locker room after San Jose, he said that he's still taking care of it. And talking to Nico this morning, Nico noted that they're taking it day by day with him. They're taking it day by day with Sabovic in advance of the Sporting Kansas City match. He didn't rule either one of them definitively out, but he said that a decision had not been made about even necessarily including both of them on the team sheet. And extended conversations that were had about different parts of the roster and depth and that sort of thing indicated that he does not seem that worried about their depth at literally any position going into the Sporting Kansas City match. Based on me eyeballing it in the locker room, they had a gigantic bag of ice strapped on Sabovic's leg beneath the knee, which to me says even if he can play, it would be much better for them to not play him this week. Ilya, a similar kind of thing, is somebody who has had those kinds of back spasm issues as an athlete myself. That is the kind of thing that even if you can come back into play and grin and bear it, it sure would be a lot better to not have to put that pressure on him. And contrary to what things were like in 23 and even 24, I don't think they absolutely need to, and it would be better to not break these guys when they are still on the mend. We saw them keep Robert Taylor out for an extended period of time, and I feel like he's still finding his sea legs, as it were, in coming back, which is part of the reason that I suspect, even though we haven't gotten direct confirmation of this, that we have not seen him really forcefully put out there starting or getting major meaningful minutes. Is I think that sometimes something that even if he says that he's okay and maybe he looks okay in training, we saw him look pretty good in one match and then he didn't look so good in another match. And I think that them having the roster depth that they do now makes it so that they do not have to destroy these guys in the interest of just playing who they have. And giving people time to cook, giving people time to mend and repair. In the case of Nico Dubrsarski, he didn't have an injury, but he was green and he was in a very different environment than he was used to, playing in a system he wasn't used to. And I think the time riding the bench and continuing to work on it is something that in recent matches, including that San Jose game, we have seen really great progress and long-term strength from having him in the lineup as a result of them being cautious. So I get people going, oh man, this guy should play, this guy should play. But based on what we have seen this season, I trust that judiciousness more than doubt it at this point.
Yeah. And the thing is, I'm sure Ilya would relish being in that game because, of course, he did play there from 2017 to 2021. When he had less cool hair, he did not look like Jesus then. He looked like maybe a lesser apostle, maybe
it's
like
where
a
he won his
Bartholomew
first
or a Thaddeus. Yeah, right. So, all right. So do we talk about another midfielder here in Owen Wolff?
I think we do. Phil, you spilled a fair amount of digital ink putting together a piece just dedicated to the lone wolf, Owen Wolff. Let me actually ask you to kick this off. What motivated you to write this? What made you feel like this needed to be said? This needed to be said now?
With that assist, not only did we get the news on Tuesday morning when I was mulling this that he was named to the MLS Team of the Week for the 5th time in 2025, which is leading everybody in Verde for Team of the Week appearances. So that was certainly something that was time peggy for that. But with that assist that I praised, that assist that we talked about before, he has double-digit goal contributions for the first time in his career. 4 goals, 6 assists, still 7 matches to go. He is still just 20 years old. He's not turning 21. 2021 until December 30th. And we've seen this real evolution in his game. And what I wanted to do, first of all, was just look at his numbers now and look at where he is. Again, we've talked about this before. You've heard this, you've seen this if you've read my work. From FBref, the men's next 14 competitions, which means not the elite leagues like your La Liga or your Premier League, but MLS, Liga MX, Eredivisie, a bunch of the top Brazilian league, number of leagues that are on kind of a pinnacle, same tier with MLS, or maybe even arguably a little bit above that, but not quite in the big five European leagues. Anyway, he is in some pretty rarefied air among the midfielders. 93rd percentile in non-penalty goals, 91st percentile in assists, 94th percentile in non-penalty XG plus XAG, and then 89th percent in shot creating actions, 96th percentile in progressive carries, 97th percentile in successful take-ons, 97th percentile in progressive passes received, 92nd percentile in touches. You get the idea here. So he is really killing it among midfielders. If you look at his numbers with attacking midfielders and wingers, he's not quite as high up, but he's still fairly respectable. And then if you look at his midfield numbers between this year and last year, he's definitely showing improvement in pretty much every area except for pass completion, which probably has to do with a little bit more of the risk that he's taking on, and then clearances, of course, because he's not playing significant minutes as a fullback anymore.
One of the things that keeps coming up in very fan conversations, just water cooler kind of conversations, is does the team sell him? And we'll get more into this as we get into the banquet that Chef Rodo laid out for us over the course of 84 minutes. The club says 85. Phil tagged it at 84. It's like the disagreement between FBref and MLS stats at sometimes.
It's 84 something.
Variance.
I think it's like 84-23 or something like that.
We'll count it like the game clock is 85.
I rounded down.
You rounded down. The club rounded up. I think we need that kind of variance.
It was still long. Still the longest thing we've done, I think. Not counting wait times, of course. Yeah. Definitely even longer than like the Matthew McConaughey TED Talk when he was an owner and they did the thing at 310 Live, which was surreal, but that was fun. I actually covered that one for the Statesman. So that was Chris Bills was on vacations. Jason Jarrett, who was sports editor at Statesman at the time, called me over, and I got to do that, and that was a treat. I did not expect to see a Matthew McConaughey TED Talk about how a soccer ball brings people together, but that's what happened.
Hey, you learned things. The thing that I wanted to touch on from that presser is that the topic of Owen and Owen's worth is something that was brought up, and one of the things that he was talking about was, how do these teams end up with millions in GAM? Well, they sell players. And that recurring conversation that people keep having is, well, does the team sell Owen? If so, for how much and to where? And in looking at continuing to boost his valuation, one of the things that sure helps that is really stellar performance. Okay, that's happening. Sustained stellar performance. That's the other part of that. The question becomes, in terms of making that leap to Europe, as he has said that he would like to at some point, is the time for that going into the next season? Or, this is something I'd ask for your speculation on, do you think it makes more sense for the club to continue developing him both in terms of his play and his market value, and take advantage of him being able to take on U22 status, boost his salary a bit as a result of having that kind of shelter when it comes to roster rule hit, and look to sell him not in the very next window, not even necessarily the window after that, but maybe 3 or 4 windows hence? What do you think?
Yeah. First of all, I'm curious if Austin really can convert him to a U22 since he was homegrown. That's something I'm not exactly clear on. My take on the U22 roster rule is that is to bring a player into the league anew, that it isn't something where you just necessarily take a player that's younger and then you can convert to U22. So that's something that I still want to delve into a little bit. I'm going to try to dig into this a little bit more because this is something that really makes me curious. But even if he can't be brought in as a U22 from homegrown status, even if he is just going to be a senior player, the one thing that I'm beginning to realize more and more as I watch his play, as I see his potential, is that he is increasingly becoming important to this team. Not just, oh, he's this nice player that we're developing, we're going to send him off to Europe, we're going to make all this money. It might be that we are next year going to have much more value centering a team around Owen Wolff's talents than getting GAM for him by offloading him to Europe.
I think you're right. Honestly, that's the way that I have increasingly been thinking about this, where for a while, I really, knowing that he had that aspiration, I think I was letting that guide myself in going, well, this is the path that it's probably going to take because this is what an MLS player wants to do. But especially as the conditions of the league continue changing, do you want to go to Europe and be a Gio Reyna who's not getting meaningful minutes and having to bounce from club to club just to play? Or do you want to redefine the role of a central midfielder in the way that, to me, I don't see Owen Wolff becoming a Messi, and that's not a call on his quality. I'm saying in terms of the style of play, he is an unselfish Swiss Army knife player who is willing to do the job that needs to be done. He will play the false whatever he needs to do. He will let things play through him. He will unselfishly make the right choice in the right moment, even if it leads to a mistake. And that's one of the things that I've admired the most about the consistency of his play as it keeps developing.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to bear out necessarily, but one of the phrases that's swirling around in my head right now to describe his play is box to box plus. Like, he is conventional 8. He does that kind of work. He can certainly defend. I mean, he's been a fullback and he is able to advance the ball. We looked at a little bit of the match against San Jose, and he was leading the team in passes into the final third, which again is something that typically a fullback or central midfielder is going to do. But then he does also have that ability to assist as well. And then he can also finish. He's not a conventional number 10. I mean, this team has never had a conventional number 10. I don't know if they ever will have a conventional number 10. I know that is something that it's given me a little bit of consternation. I know it's given other people out there in both just the fan world and then the media world a little bit of consternation as well. But at the same time, if you have, like you're saying, this is a player who is going to weigh redefining what a central midfielder is, what a central midfielder can be. And if he's making this leap between 19 and 20, imagine what he's going to do between 20 and 21, 21 and 22, 22 and 23. He could be an absolute monster by the time that, 2027, 2028 rolls around, right? So we could have somebody who is going to get into perennial all-star status, redefining the way that this plays. Like, you maybe don't need a 10, you just need this 8 that can take on these kind of extra dimensions, who is able to possess, who is able to find key passes, who is able to get the ball consistently into the final third. And then if you have Bucari, for example, stepping up and doing what everybody's expected him to do, then you can have this pretty lethal offense without actually having a true number 10.
And then you've also got a couple of other things that I think he's undersung for. He is great at controlling his card count. Like, as in a league where card cume is increasingly like you are missing crucial players because they are magnet style attracting them. Danny Pereira, no offense, Danny, but come on, you know that it's one of the things that you're good at, and maybe it's not the best thing to be good at. And then also
he can poop house like like Diego Rubio, but he does not get the cards that Diego Rubio gets. And then because he's very smart about the way that he does this.
He's also really smart about managing his body too. Like, you don't, yes, he's young, he's 20, but he's not invincible. Right. But you do not see him going for something and putting his every last fiber of his being into it because it might result in a goal, going overboard the way that I think youth can lead us to foolhardy choices and overextend. And I hate to mention Danny again, but there was that injury. The most recent big injury that he picked up was a result of him overextending, both figuratively and literally. You don't see Owen Wolff do that. And the other thing is, the way that they deploy him and the way that the system is working currently, and ideally, I think, intended to work, it works such that if you do lose Owen Wolff, maybe for national team call-ups, maybe for injury, the whole thing doesn't fall apart because you're building a team of not just a few Swiss Army knives. It's that ideally you want an Owen, you want a John Gallagher, you want guys that you can flex in and out of different positions. Bidu, we saw literally in the San Jose game, him and John Gallagher trading places and keeping that side of the San Jose defense completely off balance because they were not expecting this guy who was honestly at times playing more like a central defender and then disappeared completely from central defense and was suddenly playing midfield. And then John Gallagher has moved back there. Having that kind of dynamic, just as the most recent evidence of the club playing that way, even though it didn't involve Owen Wolff at all, that's what it made me think of, was this is them deploying tactics that are like the way that the club has been using Owen Wolff for ages, that they really want to see more and more of these guys play flexibly. I feel like eventually that's what they want Dubrsarski to do too. They want him to play like an Owen Wolff, who is managing his body well, who is managing his card cume well, and who is able to float in and out of different spaces and keep the other side off balance, rather than have to keep the secret of the fancy trick that made 2022 go so well. When everybody figured out those fancy tricks, guess what? The club was cooked. And only in the 23 and 24 seasons, when they played this kind of truly dynamic, to me, the true expression of the concepts of total football, only then were they actually having success in 23 and 24, because the spare parts that we had working together well, everybody figured out how to dismantle that. If you have a team full of Swiss Army knives, you don't have to worry about that.
Of course, success in 23 and 24 being relative.
Right. In very focused small batches. Small batch, limited edition, can only get it this weekend in a blind box.
And not enough of those batches. On the topic of Owen and Rodo together, with that Rodo presser, I know that there was some kind of Spanish language stuff about Owen and Danny, so I was kind of curious about that. And I know that you had also asked about them as well, specifically. So
yeah, there was an earlier question by our colleague Laura Laparse, and she asked about Owen and Danny, and Rodo led talking about needless criticisms that Owen endured, and that
last year.
It's very last year. At the same time, I like the way that he historically contextualizes things. And I think that giving players their flowers, it includes continuing to note, this is not a guy who just lucked into things and the nepotism charges and that kind of thing. Honestly, I think that once his dad was no longer his coach, he really unlocked in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm, and without saying it in those words, that's very much the gist of what I felt like Rodo was getting at, which is that this is a very talented player. He's not just saying it to say it. He's not just saying it to boost the guy's value. It's that is why he has been prioritized as a very central, pun definitely included, definitely intended, part of the project overall. And Danny as well, that they are both making very strong strides. They are working very well in a double pivot together. And the follow-up that I asked was in the locker room after the San Jose game. I noticed that he came in and he had just a few words between him and the two of them. And I wanted it looked like some praise, the way that it landed on both of them, that it was recognition. It was validation that they are doing the work and they are making strides. And I asked him to tell us what that was about. And I enjoyed that he really made no bones about the fact that he mentioned to Danny a couple of things that he needs to improve. And then just said, make sure you come back healthy from your international duty, which is, it's like, yeah, you did pretty good. 2 notes. And also, don't come back busted. And with regard to Owen, the thing that I thought was interesting was that he said that kind of praise, it's important, but it's also important how it's given and in what way it's given, indicating that he's very specific in the way that he parcels that kind of thing out. And he has not elevated himself to, godlike status, but it feels to me like, based on other things that he said then and has said in the past, part of his big project has been very much that 100-year war thing of the long-term structure and stability of the club and the way that it functions. And for these players who are still here and who want to still be here, or who want to be sold on at a value to a club that they want to be at, they definitely understand that they do need to be on the right side of their sporting director. That kind of cliquishness, that is gone with the wind, as is Claudio Reyna, of either you're one of his guys or not one of his guys. There is not that kind of, you were with him at this club and you have this relationship with him. None of them had that relationship with Rodo. And with Rodo, it is instead, how are you performing? How are you winning your spot? How are you keeping your spot? How are you proving yourself? And it seems that, in his opinion, Danny and Owen have very much risen to that occasion in both of their respects. And even though they both have different things to work on.
Okay. I wanted to also, I know that there's some talk about the second team as well. And this has been
Yeah.
a recurring theme with Roto that MLS Next Pro is not on the same level by any stretch as MLS, not even on the same level as, say, USL Championships. Curious a little bit about that talk. And again, I know that we have talked in the past about, oh, maybe Alistue is good enough to play with the first team, or maybe Irvin Torres is still developing and can eventually get himself on the first team. So just kind of curious about his perspective on where things are there right now.
He echoed a lot of stuff that he said in the past. That in his introductory press conference, in answer to me, he said the difference between MLS and MLS Next Pro, you've got to understand, is vast, vast.
Yep.
On double, triple underlined that.
Yep.
And based on the soccer pyramid of things, MLS Next Pro is third division, not second division, literally, not just in terms of perception or figuratively. Many, myself included, I feel reasonably rate it as Academy Plus. It is not Academy level, but it is barely professional, and that's not meant as an insult. It's meant as a realistic assessment of where these players are in their development. The goal should always be that they are too good to be on that team. And I feel that the comments he had when I brought up Jorge Alastue, yes, he needs to do that, but he's not there yet. And I asked specifically if his early season injury slowed or delayed finding him a place within the structure of the first team, and he dismissed it as no, they've got to prove it. You know, he did not show up good enough to be too good for Next Pro. He showed up with the potential to be too good for MLS Next Pro, and he needs to show that. And so I took that plainly as, well, he's not there yet. What we saw from the midweek on a Friday presser with Nico this morning is that apparently Irvin Torres and Tony Gomez are good enough because they didn't play in the Minnesota match this afternoon. And at first he was being cagey about, oh, we hope. And then he pretty much just said they're going to be with us against Kansas City. And when they weren't even on the team sheet and didn't travel to Minnesota, now we know for sure that they.
And that's interesting because Irvin Torres was too hurt to play with the U19s, but is perhaps not
U19 identity camp. U19
Right.
identity camp, which is something that has been helpfully pointed out in various spaces, social and otherwise, is that U19 identity camp is very much for kids who live in far-flung places who don't have access to major pipeline teams, academies, areas, that kind of thing, to identify talent, to get this talent on the radar. Irvin Torres has actually played MLS minutes right at the end of last season. Irvin Torres doesn't really need to be identified. And to me, not to accuse the club of funny business, but it could just be that he needed to look questionable for the purpose of, gosh, we just can't send him to you guys. He's just a little banged up and we can't risk it. And gee shucks, we're so sorry, but he's got to stay home. Oh, look.
Remarkable recovery.
Look, he can go to the homecoming dance after all, Phil.
A few days at St. David's Performance Center and the whirlpool baths and
the healing energies of the whirlpool baths. Yeah, I think all told, Roto's assessment of the second team was really well summed up when he said, when he compared to the Spanish system, of in the Spanish system, the B team is good enough to jump right in and play first team minutes.
Yeah.
He drew a very clear line that that is not what MLS Next Pro is, period.
Right.
As much as various other teams definitely have built their homegrown pipeline such that they do functionally have a lot more of that. North Texas into FC Dallas, as an example. Some people would accuse that of being their puppy mill process of selling off young players at a profit and that sort of thing. And it could be that that is the pipeline idea that's going to work itself out, but this is still a very young club, and we haven't seen the amount of time for that true purpose to reveal itself as to what the overall vibe of what Austin's going to use its second team for. But it seems clear that the hope is that breakthrough players do show themselves to be extra good and extra ready and get those first team minutes and are comparative bargains as compared to bringing in other players.
Right. Yeah. And my article on Thursday morning, which recapped what was going on Wednesday, got into a lot of the really nerdy roster rule stuff, which I found really fascinating. And definitely look at the article if the roster rules nerdery is your thing, because there's plenty of that in there. But one thing I wanted to touch on that kind of came up in the interview that hasn't really been talked about yet is there was some talk about the media and media treatment and kind of some things swirling around about positivity being something that is needed. And I think it's maybe in talking to you, it's maybe even a little bit misconstrued. So maybe unpack a little bit
Yeah.
what I am talking about obliquely here. And then let's get into kind of maybe the how that translates and then how it again, since we are part of the Austin media landscape, just curious about how thinking about the whole kind of spectrum of coverage, maybe what he's looking at and where to be a little self-indulgent for a second, where we fall in at.
Yeah, I think one of the things that regularly will be a part of these kinds of conversations is stuff that I think in the early days of the club, everything was a hot take, everything was fresh out of the oven, everything was glistening with oil, having been freshly fried. And there is just in this general media landscape, there is a propensity to leap to a particular assumption. And what he was saying in Spanish used the word positivo, which you literally translate it, and it's positive, positively in a positive way. And I feel like it is unreasonable to directly translate that as he was insisting on positive coverage of the club, as if we were unpaid publicists whose job it is to promote the club and do that sort of thing. To me, it was a veiled reference to certain things that, in referencing them this way, I think anybody who's been keyed into the club for any length of time would know a piece of what I'm talking about. Disingenuousness is what he was looking to combat. What he is looking at is looking for people coming from a genuine place, playing fair, and being reasonable about certain things. We talked about the role of a, I guess you would say, a traditional South American central attacking midfielder, a traditional 10, that the club does not work with at this point, which you can say is an opinion. I think that is short-sighted. I think it would be better for them to do that. You can build a solid argument that is reasonable to do that kind of thing. What is not reasonable...
Sure, I've done that at points.
Yeah, various points. And that's an opinion, and you back it up, and it's a reasoned argument. That's a very different thing than, let's say, for example, you were to say, well, look, here's Rodolfo Borrell saying he has a full roster and he has roster depth of 2 people at every position. And here's the coach. The coach is saying, oh, we don't have any traditional 10 central midfielders. Therefore, they have lied to you. I have found them out. Here's the great controversy. They should all burn in hell for these horrible sins, these lies that are perpetrated on the fan base.
They don't play a 10 in a midfield that's 2 8s and a 6.
Right.
Therefore, they're not fully stocked. Kind of the rationale there. Right.
It's, hey, this store that doesn't sell this thing doesn't sell this thing. And they told you that they would sell this thing, even though there's a giant sign on the window that says, this thing not sold here. No Labubus to be found.
I'm looking for chocolate at the gummy bears store.
Exactly.
There's no chocolate. There's just gummy bears.
Yeah. To me, this comment from Rodo, and I did ask for official on the record characterization of what was said to make sure that I was presenting it right. And at press time, I did not have a response from them, but that isn't to say that I won't get one at some point. But the way that I took it, as someone who grew up with English and Spanish bilingually from a very early age as dual native languages, there is a level of nuance that can get missed. That, yes, you can interpret it that way. And as much as I feel like the instinct may lead you toward wanting to look for those things that are insisting that everybody should be boosting up the club owned by a billionaire or something like that. That isn't at all my interpretation of what was being said. To me, it was much more an elusive reference to, there are certain ways that expressing expectations as facts rather than opinions does not hold a lot of water with him. In the same way that in answer to another question, I talked to him about expectations, and for the rest of the season, for the playoffs, for the Open Cup run, he expressed at the same time both that he has very high expectations, that he disagrees with the notion that only the last quarter of the season should be played where every game is a final. Every game should have been played as a final from the beginning of the season, while also not taking the player who mentioned that to us to task. At the same time, he said that expectations can often be above reality, he finds, within this community, within this fan base. And I think that that carries over to his assessment of the role of the media, which isn't to be uncritical. Like, he hasn't shown me the door, because as the opening question of Nico Estévez' first press conference, I said, so why this guy? You said names we wouldn't believe. Why this guy? Not antagonistically, but as a completely fair question. I don't think he expected it. I think he maybe took it a little bit wrong in the moment, but I think since understands that what I was trying to do was just go, okay, explain yourself, introduce this guy to us, because he had gotten used to a certain subset of the kinds of questions that he would get pelted with coming from a disingenuous place. And like, I have been accused of, oh, Nico's your boy. And I'm like, if he was my boy, why is he not paying my mortgage? Why, like, he could be writing me a check if I'm allegedly his unpaid publicist. I've been far from uncritical about the guy, but there's a difference between taking things at face value and looking for the sinister intent, sinister meaning behind it every single time.
There's a difference between having a critical eye and being out to get from the outset, like having an agenda. And and I think that's maybe what Roto's getting at, right? So again, if you come at covering soccer from this kind of jaundiced place where you expect like everything to be bad and to be disappointed all the time, it becomes an exercise in self-flagellation. It's like, what are you doing watching soccer? Like, you should have a healthier hobby. There have been times this season where this is not a very fun team to cover. These are not very fun games to watch. It's not fun to see them possibly break this record for fewest goals in a season. That's not what I signed on for when I signed on to 2025 and got excited about things with the offseason signings. But at the same time, it's like if you come from this place of, I think we do, where, we understand there are ups and downs in soccer. We understand that this is not the most talent-laden team in the world, but we understand there's a coach with the heart in the right place. There are players that some are very, very talented. Some are very good role players. There's a chemistry that's building. They're an assortment of genuinely nice, good guys. This is a way more cohesive locker room than we saw last year, for example. If you come at it from this approach of, okay, this is a project, there's a narrative that's going to unfold. I'm going to cover this narrative. I'm going to see what happens, and I'm going to try to be as honest and insightful as possible and ask hard questions when they need to be asked, and compliment players and coaches when they deserve being complimented, then I think that's a completely fair way to do it. I mean, objective is a weird word because everybody comes in with kind of subjectivities, and there is a certain amount of journalistic remove that we have, but I like soccer. I like Austin.
I like watching good
Verde
soccer,
Black.
man.
Of course, I want to see this team succeed. It's much more fun to, like, if I get to go to an Open Cup final, that's great. Like, well, I would enjoy that much more than not going to an Open Cup final, for instance.
Let me like, just writing at the whistle. Isn't it so much better, having done a few of them now? Isn't it so much better having something interesting to write about rather than, and now begins the steady collapse, and now further falls the house of Usher?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Like, it's not fun. It's not a thing that you take time in the same way that the players are taking time away from their families to do all this travel and do all this training. We take time away from our families and loved ones to do this stuff.
And like the Atlanta game, that to me was like a particular dick punch, because it's, okay, here's this win. You know, it's not a pleasant win. It's not a beautiful win, but it's a win. And then, oh no, it's a draw. It's a really crappy team. So are we a really crappy team? You know, those questions come up in those moments.
Yeah. And like, something that you keyed in on, I very much took what he said to don't be down in the dumps and don't talk about the bad times being bad. En las buenas y las malas, in the good times and the bad, is not about trying to find a silver lining to every bad situation. But instead of a silver lining, we're doing the guy from the Weather Channel standing out on the dock going, well, a record-setting wind, at least I'm about to die, but at least I have something interesting to report. Doing something with what is being said, rather than just going, these shovels are here and the grave is right there. I could just help. It's really,
I mean, a few weeks ago, like a few weeks ago, I wrote about this team does not do well after July. Like, their August through November records are pretty dismal compared to what they do the rest of the season. But part of that is Can this be something that they can turn around? Is there some kind of reasoning for this? But if you looking at those trends, I think is valid because that is a concern, that is a problem, that is something that is holding the team back.
Yeah.
But it's not, oh, I want to pile on. It's just, here's this worry and concern. And who knows? Maybe they
Yeah.
read this, maybe they get inspired, maybe they play every game from here on out like they did against San Jose, and they can buck that trend. That would
After
be
that,
nice. I would love to write about, hey, they had really dismal August through Octobers in all these years, and then somehow in 2025 they flipped the switch and figured out what was happening, and lo and behold, they ended up getting a better point per game record than they did throughout the whole season, versus now where it's like their post-July performances have all pretty much been under what they did during the regular season.
I mean, after that Montreal loss, or rather, as the announcer said it, Montreal.
Yeah.
I got on We Are Austin's Twitter space, and Hernan and I were both apoplectic. We were like, what is happening? It was a venting of frustration. It was a semi-despondent, why is history repeating itself? We thought history was going to not repeat itself kind of thing. And I don't think that goes against what Roto was getting at. What I think, to crystallize it, is he is not with the gaslighting. He is not with the alternate reality. He is not with the alternative facts kind of BS that we both know some specific examples, but there are also general examples of things that we see in the Austin FC media ecosystem, in the broader national media ecosystem, in a variety of different industries outside of politics, even, where it is about misrepresenting things for the sake of having the most visible hot take, which I feel the vast majority of the Austin media ecosystem, credentialed and non-credentialed, the vast, vast majority does not engage in that kind of stuff at all. Those were shots that, to me, were leveled at none of us that were in the room, and even many people that were not in the room, that are coming at things from a genuine place and giving benefit of the doubt when it needs to be given, and withholding it reasonably when it should be withheld. The get me once, get me twice, not going to get me a third time kind of situation is at play. To a point that Ilie brought up, the fans have to hold the players accountable. And that is why they won that game against El Paso. To me, it was exactly the same company line as what Ilie was saying and what Roto has said in other press conferences and in other media availabilities about fiercely defending the right way to conduct oneself. Even if he will occasionally step over the line in the, how to put this, the level of color and enthusiasm that he puts into pushing back on what he would term as bad behavior. And that's one of the reasons that I may not like everything that he says. I may not like every choice that he makes as sporting director, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And again, I mean, like Ilie talked about the role of the media in that too. Ultimately, it is about accountability, right? So, but if you are coming from this place of, I'm going to criticize everything and I'm going to have a hot take about every single thing, then it's not very credible criticism, because you know that it's going to be criticism. But if you see a balanced approach, and it's, this match certainly did this team no favors on their playoff push. The team certainly feels that. The team certainly knows that. When I let Brad Stuver know that Austin was out of Copa Tejas, I didn't have to let them know that they were out of Copa Tejas, but that's something that I did. I am usually ready with kind of the stats and the numbers and things like that. Brad sarcastically said, "Thanks, Phil," but I'm there as this person who will hold the team accountable, not in a judgy way, but in a, I'm being realistic here. I am this kind of metronome that you can gauge your performances against.
Let me defend Phil West, bad guy of that moment, for a second. Frankly, if I were Brad, which look, that he's a lot taller than I am, and probably would have helped me in the last Media Cup game if I were as tall as he was, I would rather be able to encapsulate that knowledge in the wake of that game that felt like a loss, that determined that future, rather than find it out on social media 3 hours later. Contain the blast within a certain radius. And it's better for it to come from one of us in that kind of a situation, where it's not meant to antagonize them. It's not meant to go, hey, so your dog just died. I bet that sucked. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And instead
did not deliver it like that, by the way. It was,
no, not at all.
There was context provided with that, but had to share that was part of the equation of that particular result.
And in the moment, he may not have liked learning it. And in the balance of things, that is a better thing than it coming from somebody antagonizing them on social media, just trying to throw throw it in their face. And, to me, there is also gray area where we could be accused of being football manager playing armchair managers. And to an extent, that's the job. So back off. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And they don't have to like every time that we happen to be right about something that they don't like hearing. Something that I have said in many a heated discussion, controversial conversation or debate is just because you don't like what I'm saying doesn't mean that it's untrue or that I'm being unreasonable in the way that I'm saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just because you don't like reality doesn't make it not reality. And to me, the nuance of what Rodo was saying was about, let's just at least all agree to one version of reality and a certain standard of conduct. And again, it wasn't aimed at any of us. It was perhaps a statement on who was in the room and who wasn't.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. I always try to come with numbers too. It's not just your performance was poor against Montreal. It's like Montreal got the first 6 shots against you, and then they managed to gain back the lead before halftime.
Dude, honestly, so many of the times that you'll say stuff like that in post-match pressers, Nico will yes and right off of it and go, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And here is exactly how it went wrong, and here's why it went wrong, and what we think we need to do. Yes, we need to review tape. There are those things that he always rattles off. We need to look at tape. We need to get scans. We need to do whatever. But that's one of the things that accountability-wise, I feel like I can actually hang with this group of guys that even if I don't like what they are saying to me, at least it is reasonable and factual the vast majority of the time, and they obfuscate things that it's their job to obfuscate. And I understand why they've got to.
Yeah, and even Josh sometimes, who was like prickly about so many things, would yes and my stats, because I would come with stats. God. I would come with like homework. Yeah.
Now you're defending Josh Wolff. Phil, what happened to you?
I'm not defending Josh Wolff. I'm just saying that I'm defending my approach for even pricklier coaches than Nico Estévez.
Phil, I was just dropping an example of exactly what Rodo doesn't believe in, and which I think all of us agree is you can make a big, stupid generalization like that, but back it up. And maybe it's not so stupid and it's not as much of a generalization. You just drop something like that and state it as fact. It's a different thing than, I hate to be the bearer of the bad news, but you know that you're in the bad news chair this week. So here's where it is. To me,
the bad news chair. That's perfect. Yeah.
Like for me, that 84 verging on 85-minute press conference to me was a statement of one of the other things that he said that he is proudest of is in rebuilding the structure, rebuilding the mentality of the whole organization and the way that it functions. And that's why we get the better part of an hour and a half with the sporting director who the comms director says, hey, we've hit an hour. And Rodo says, no, let them ask whatever they want. I mean, let's not do 2 hours. But then he took us within 35 minutes of 2 hours and is willing to make that time and make that availability. Though, here we go. Here's my critical note. There was a question from the fan base, from the press. We generally get a press conference after each transfer window. Where's that press conference? And we sure didn't get it after the Montreal game. And bears mentioning that it's probably wise that it didn't happen right after the Montreal game. And it definitely would have flowed radically differently had it not been on the other side of that San Jose game. And we found out about it roughly 24 hours before it happened. And it is the kind of thing that I think there was definite gamesmanship in deciding when he was going to face the press. And maybe there was something in conversations leading into the San Jose game where it's, look, guys, I have to go talk to the press. Don't make me do it when you're like this, because you know what that'll be like.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that conversation got had speculatively.
Right.
Maybe that kind of thing is part of what worked into the mentality that we saw show up against the Quakes.
And then all of a sudden, we got this notice 24 hours ahead, like you said, dropped into the weekly schedule, just kind of randomly. Oh, look, there's a Roto press conference.
It was one of those
here on this Wednesday.
It was one of those where I texted you and I was like, oh, hey, by the way, this. And you're like, oh, well, that's soon. Okay.
Hadn't opened that email yet, but
All right.
And I was having a particularly day job kind of day. So that pretty much kept me at arm's length until we got to talk about things after when I was on my lunch break, which was great. All right, so let's go ahead. I want to talk a little bit about this SKC match. Speaking of the bad news chair, I don't know if they're necessarily going to be in this because I have some stats that show that they might not be in the bad news chair after this game, but it does bear mentioning Murdo Ozuni out on international duty, Alexander Spatak, Julio Cascante, Danny Pereira, and Jimmy Time all out on international duty. Ilya and Savovic probably not going to play with their injuries. Leads them with a pretty thin squad heading into SKC, but I have some stats to drop on you in a second here. But any just kind of initial thoughts about the paucity of the roster combined with the relative badness of Sporting Kansas City this year?
Man, we're dropping SAT words left and right. Paucity, damn.
Yes, we are. Yep.
Something that bears mentioning that we got from the midweek press conference on a Friday this morning, very strong indication that, as I mentioned, was then validated as, well, yeah, just expect Irvin Torres and Tony Gomez to be with us on Sunday. You can expect to see Irvin Torres and Tony Gomez called up and in the squad, as they did not play against Minnesota. You definitely want to rest guys before you potentially need to bring them in. It would be, I would say, surprising to see either one of them start, for sure, but not completely out of the realm of possibility, but I would say very, very, very unlikely. Do either of them get minutes? Also, I don't know. Depends on the flow of the game, but it could be.
Probably not, but maybe.
Probably not, but maybe. We got some real confidence from Nico in talking about positional flexibility. He mentioned that Buka has played as a center forward at other clubs that he's been at, which indicates maybe we see him at the top of the formation. Maybe that was a bit of tipping in the hand of what the intention is. Mentioned that there's flexibility in the back line too, that even Dessler could play as a center back, which surprised me. I didn't expect him to tip it that much. He joked that Dubrsarski could too, because Dubrsarski was sitting right next to him. Dubrsarski was the player that we talked to, as they offer us a player along with the coach every week. Initially,
everybody can be a center back.
I was like, well, that's news to me. And then he clarified. He was like, by the way, I'm joking, because he's sitting right here. So talking about Dessler being to play centrally, I led with saying we've seen Bidu play center back. And there were strong indications that they are looking at using the kind of positional flexibility that John Gallagher has, that Bidu and Dessler can have as central players. They've got John Kolmanich for left back. They've got John being able to drop back into right back. Even in a pinch, Owen Wolff. There was a lot of emphasis placed on how completely unworried he is about who he has available for him on Sunday, which on the one hand could be construed as projecting confidence and we're going to always give it 110%. We're going to win every game. But look, in advance of that Montreal game, he said Prince Owusu is going to be a problem, and then he was. A lot of times, I really find that Nico shoots straighter than people tend to expect based on the way that other MLS coaches, Ben Olsen, tend to talk about a variety of things.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Let me lay some stats on you, first of all, and then I want to get into what I think might be the starting lineup. So if you are worried about Sporting Kansas City, Joveljic is on this team. And he's got 16 goals this year. We have seen him burn Austin FC before, of course, when he was with Galaxy. He's certainly formidable. And again, obviously, big storied history that SKC has. But this season, most goals allowed, 57 goals, and also the most goals allowed per 90, tied with the Galaxy, 2.04 goals a game. Second most shots on target against. Their save percentage is in the bottom third. They have the most post shots XG of any team, which means basically once a ball is off a head or a foot or other body part towards goal, kind of the chance that has of going in, that is a 51.5 post shot XG. And they are towards the bottom, in the bottom 7 of this post shot XG minus goals allowed metric, which Brad Stuver is particularly excellent with. SKC is not. They have just 35.2 XG this year, but they do have 40 goals. So they are overperforming their XG, but that's not a great number. And then they are 28th in expected assisted goals, and they are actually 4th in assists minus expected assisted goals, which means they have 5 more assists than they really should have. But in terms of creating chances, they're not terribly good at it compared to other teams in the league. So they're not particularly adept at a lot of things that set up goals, and they're pretty bad at letting goals in. So those are encouraging numbers, right?
Something that I mentioned on the last episode was selective sample size. I think that they are worrying more in the context of looking at it season long. And they're also worrying, unfortunately, looking at them at the 3 games prior to the San Jose game, and even those 3 games in conjunction with the San Jose game. I would assume, not knowing the numbers or having them prepped, also the numbers in just that limited, the 4 most recent matches sample size is not great. And to me, what carries them to what will probably be a more favorable betting line that we will find out about the time that kickoff is about to happen. We'll get Kevin Egan telling us how to bet, and then the announcers will tell us what the betting lines are.
Never bet on soccer, by the way.
Never bet on soccer, by the way. And I literally don't, and I hate it. It's one of the things that I think ruins sports. But hey, that's a whole other conversation. I think that the win probability will be more in Austin's favor, in part because of the limited if you limit the sample size to their most recent matches, that you're looking at an Austin that is on the first stage of a heater in the way that they're behaving, in the way that their heads are. Looking at Sporting Kansas City, they're only missing 2 guys. They're missing Bassong, who would have been suspended due to the yellow card that he got against Colorado if he were playing in this game, which he's not anyway. And Ian James, who is also going to be on international duty. So they're not as depleted as Austin is, but
Manu Garcia is still hurt.
Say again?
Manu Garcia is still hurt.
That was the other one that I almost forgot. Manu Garcia is still hurt. They've had a weird season post Peter Vermees. There is something to a club finding its stability on the other side of a coach dismissal, as we saw in Austin as well. And I think that those factors can fight with the stats a little bit, where you can try to look at things from a consistency manner, but things have been very up and down. Things have been very this way, that way, and upside down. And to dip back into the rotopresser for a moment, and the question I asked him about what kind of a job I think that he thinks Nico Estévez has done, because many of us have very firmly held beliefs about that. He noted that he feels like people have forgotten that Austin lost their primary DP in Brandon Vasquez 8 or 9 games ago, and have managed to not completely collapse, even though they have given various indications of getting somewhere within shooting range of that. So I feel like stacking them up against each other, that's one of the things that has to be considered. Is you can look at trend lines, but we've also got to take the heat of the moment, because the heat of the moment is what won that San Jose game. They showed up in a completely different way, in a completely different mentality, and depleted. They've got guys who are going to be getting minutes and getting opportunities that they don't normally get, that will be the biggest stage possible to show their worth and show that they have earned spots that they do not currently have.
So let's go ahead and talk about this potential starting lineup. So this is what I'm seeing. So along the back line, I'm seeing Komanich as left back. I'm seeing BHI and Biru as center backs. Djordjevic could theoretically, since he has a center back, start at center back, but I don't think he is acclimated enough to life at Austin FC to do that. We might see some minutes from him off the bench, but I would picture BHI and Biru starting at center back and then Dessler at right back. Does that seem like a reasonable back four to you?
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me.
Okay. And then midfield 3, I think I'm going to say that even though this would be a perfect game for Taylor to start, I still don't think that Estévez is going to do it, because I really do think that there's some weirdness between them. So I think it's going to be Wolff and Rubio and Dubrsarski as midfield 3.
Yeah, I think that's completely reasonable. And I think it will strike people as very strange. If the roster drops in the way that I feel like I've got a beat on where you're going overall, I think that Rubio in the midfield is going to be seen as particularly strange. And it could be that the way the lineup shows up on the broadcast is not actually functionally, as we've seen multiple times this season, the way that they're actually setting up the lineup. But in terms of how they actually play, I think it will be surprising to a lot of people to see Rubio dropping back, even though that's most of what he's been doing in the 2-striker system that they've been running most of the season.
Yeah. So, and then across the front line, I'm thinking it's going to be Gallagher and then Bukari as a center forward. Again, he has played center forward with other teams. And I know that there's maybe some kind of questions about is that really the best place for him? Again, this is kind of chewing gum and chicken wire, right? So this is not the ideal starting 11. I think Bukari at center forward makes a lot of sense there. And then, of course, that would be Obrian at the right wing, because I do think that you have to get him into the starting lineup for this one. He's healthy. He's pretty well rested, having not gotten a ton of minutes this year, and he's familiar with the system. I think when you've got so many players out, I think you do have to have a certain kind of familiarity with each other and the team to have this succeed. And I don't appreciate 100% of Obrian's choices on the field, but I do
Yeah.
think that it makes sense for him to start here. I mean, I would put Taylor in if I was the coach rather than either Obrian or Rubio, but I don't think that that's what is going to actually happen. I think that Taylor's going to be left off once again from the starting lineup because that's just a thing that happens.
I think we're in for surprises no matter what. So I'll say that I don't feel like I'm in violent opposition to anything that you just mentioned, but I think there could be some curveballs. Like we maybe do see Robert Taylor start all of a sudden. There could be some sort of a change like that, but he has been very slow and steady wins the race in terms of making changes to the chemistry of things. We know that Rubio and Obi get along well. Buka, Obi get along well. A lot of it is maintaining stability. So I think that the reasoning for why Obi gets the start is a little bit of that. It's also a little bit of, I think he's got stuff to prove. And the longer term relationship that Obi has with Nico is something to cite, but he hasn't been getting the start for quite a while now. So there's not like some sort of favoritism because he played for Nico at Dallas that's coming into play. I think to your point, it's going to be about necessity for coming out strong, going hard, and how things progress overall. Like the wild, crazy thing, like Irvin Torres and Tony Gomez are not starting, either one of them. That much I can tell you with 100% certainty. What I'm not 100% certain on is whether or not we may see a first team start from CJ Fodre. That might be the curveball that we see. Okay. There might be, if there is a curveball diverging from what you've laid out in terms of the logic, I could see it coming from the CJ direction. I could see it from the Robert Taylor direction. And who knows? Maybe Ilie is totally fine. And maybe Ilie is starting. Who knows? There are other things like that could be happening. But I feel like conventional logic, conventional wisdom, and based on what we have to work on, I think that lineup that you've just rolled out makes sense to me. And when people see both Obi and Buka on it, I can hear people now going, oh God, are they playing Obi? Where are they putting him? And why are both of these guys? There will definitely be some gnashing of teeth because there will be something that none of us are that familiar with seeing this season that will create questions.
Yeah, but I could see some interesting stuff happening with that too, where if you do have that kind of lineup, maybe you do have Wolff shifting out to left wing, maybe you have Galley dropping back into the midfield, maybe you've got Rubio moving into striker, maybe you've got Bucari moving over. You could do some kind of interesting rotational things with that front five if you put those particular players in, just because there is, especially with Galley and Rubio and Wolff, you have that kind of level of flexibility.
Yeah, I mean,
just as long as Bucari's not being a left wing.
Exactly.
That's all I ask.
Just
keep him on the right
or
keep
side,
him central.
Please, for the love of God. I've been a big fan of when they are functionally playing, frankly, an Inter Milan style 5-2-3 and playing with the dynamic nature of a bunch of these players. In the locker room, Gallagher confirmed something that I assumed, which was it looked like you were dropping back to left back a bunch, and then I couldn't tell where Bidu was, and I'm sure that San Jose couldn't because he was causing all kinds of chaos. Was Bidu putting up the goals? No, but he was causing problems so that the other guys could get forward, and that was what was helping them break through San Jose's lines. And doing more stuff like that, not just trying to run out that trick again, because Kansas City has definitely looked at tape from the San Jose match, and they definitely saw what I saw. If I saw it, their tape guys definitely saw it 3 layers deeper than I did. That's what I'm hoping to see, is more of that kind of dynamic total football.
But if you do have Galley dropping back from wing to left back, and you have Biru cheating up from the midfield, and maybe even like venturing forward and having Duber cover for him, like that's interesting as well.
I am excited about the possibilities. I'm not just talking about win percentage or likelihood or any of that kind of thing. I am excited to see these guys do interesting things that I have not seen them do before, which goes to what you were saying earlier. It's not, I want these results or whatever, or I want, these stats. I want the story of that match to be interesting and confound me and confound everybody else that's watching. And not just because
there are these things they tried.
Yeah, here are these things that they tried. Some of them did not work.
And here's how they work.
Some of them worked spectacularly and unpredictably. That's what has me really charged up and looking forward to Sunday Night Soccer on MLS Season Pass.
Anything else that jumped out to you about what Nico said today heading into the Sunday match?
Not too much. The unflappable consistency thing, which I think is one of the things that continues to make people frustrated at me for coming off. I'm getting his back, but that's just the way that he has come off in every one of these media availabilities. He is playing the team dad kind of thing. And how long of a list of current MLS coaches do you think that we could make that would not have handled losing Brandon Vasquez at the point that they did, with the amount of games that they had left, with the form that they had going into that injury happening, and keep the locker room together the way that Nico has? I don't know that most MLS coaches would handle it as well as he has and not show some cracks of things really fracturing. We saw the locker room fracture for 2 years straight, and it didn't happen this year yet.
Even though they have lost their main DP.
Yep.
No disrespect to Murdo Azuni.
No disrespect to Murdo Azuni. But hey, that's also a nice little version of soft power from the sporting director, putting people in
that was
place.
An interesting moment.
That was a choice. That's why Rodolfo Borrell is a sporting director, and I am not, among many, many other reasons.
Okay. So let's say that you've determined this Sunday evening match that, given the circumstances, given the rotated lineup, but also given the numbers that I presented to you with SKC, that you would like to watch this match while drinking a beer.
I think that I would. I think that would be probably the ideal way to do it. And guess
where
what?
would be a place where you could do that?
You know what? Los Verdes is hosting another watch party, this time at ABW Sprinkle Valley, not the OG location, the one out in Sprinkle Valley. Nice, right?
Off Springdale, yes.
Off Springdale, 5 p.m. start, 6 p.m. kickoff, as we know. And if you haven't been out there, it's a great all-ages location. There's a playground for kids, lots of free parking. They got screens indoors and outdoors. It's a great setup for a gigantic amount of people to show up. You also, if you're a Los Verdes member, you get 10% off of your beer tab. So if you're not currently a Los Verdes member and you want to go to this thing, look, you'll get a bag of swag. But even for just the beer tab discount at ABW, it's not just at this watch party. It's any Austin Beer Works beer tab, either the OG location or the Sprinkle Valley. That's one of the benefits that you have from your Los Verdes membership. And you can log into your account and get your digital membership card and that kind of thing. And if you need help, guess what? There will be a whole bunch of Los Verdes members, board members even, that can help walk you through that. But Phil, what's one of the most crucial aspects of a watch party that I have not brought up yet? If you're showing up, if you're getting there just barely on time, and you haven't had a chance to take care of your literal physical needs as a human being.
You're talking about food, of course.
Absolutely. Phil, they're going to have both La Taquicardia and Obsidian Pizza on the premises. And I wonder if you've had any experience with these. And La Taquicardia, the taco truck, not Tachycardia, the physical condition, as I feel bears mentioning.
We have made this joke before.
Yes, and it is a good joke.
But
it's a good joke, and we reuse it. It's
never not funny. Yeah,
reduce,
absolutely.
reuse, recycle.
Tachycardia, if you're experiencing that in your body, that is bad. La tachycardia, if you're experiencing that in your mouth, it is good. It is very
absolutely
good. It is incredible.
It's very good. One of the ways that ABW never misses is on those food options. Last call is going to be 8 o'clock. They're going to want everybody out by 8:30. It is a Sunday night. It's not a holiday weekend. People got stuff to do. Kids got school and everything. But head out to ABW Sprinkle Valley. Again, starts at 5, kickoffs at 6. Have a great old time. And seriously, if you're not a Los Verdes member, jump onto losverdesatx.org, jump on the store, order your membership pack. You will get, frankly, for $35, just the swag is a bargain, but also getting 10% off of beer tabs at ABW. That's a pretty solid selling point that I got to say, I do know people who went 10% off of bar tabs. All right, I'm in. And I get swag. Fine, cool. But go check out Los Verdes this weekend.
And you know what else it is?
What else is it?
It's 8 minutes from my house.
Is there going to be a Phil West cameo at this watch party, Phil?
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Maybe
it is kid friendly, so maybe my wife and my daughter will make an appearance as well.
Hey, bring the whole family. That's the whole plan.
I think it's dog friendly too, is it?
It is dog friendly as well. It is very dog friendly. In fact,
because it's Austin.
Yeah, it's Austin, and that is Austin Beer Works. It is one of the most Austin-y of the Austin things. Before we wrap, Phil, one thing that I wanted to make just a brief mention of is I did mention earlier that I put up this piece about Austin's 8 or 9 remaining opponents, which I don't want to get to in depth because we've been going for a while, and it'll be more interesting, I think, to get into on the other side of this match. But something that
there's an article, and it's good.
Pat myself on the back. I'm quite pleased with it, mostly because I had a hunch. And one of the things that makes me happy is writing stuff up is I have a little bit of a hunch, and then I start doing rabbit hole deep diving into a bunch of stuff, and it turns out that there is some interesting stuff. And one of the more interesting things that comes from it that won't be directly relevant for weeks yet is that when I wrote this, LAFC had not played San Diego yet in Son Heung-min's first LAFC start. And that match did not go well for them. And it was very frustrating for them. It was also frustrating for Son in particular, a player who I respect a great deal and think is a wonderful person and a wonderful addition to MLS, I should mention.
You know who it wasn't frustrating for, though?
Who wasn't?
Neutrals.
Exactly.
Neutrals enjoyed it.
Neutrals enjoyed it. It was a hell of a game. And the thing that is relevant to people watching Austin is that it does set up the remaining opponent that Austin definitely has with a yet steeper hill to climb that was already incredibly steep. And LAFC is the only team in the Western Conference that has 2 runs of 3 matches in 7 days. And the second of those ends at Q2 Stadium during an international break against Austin FC. And it will be interesting to watch LAFC, even if you don't want to watch the games. I get it. Sometimes people don't. Just watching the arc of how that goes through the rest of the season. But like I said, we'll probably talk about it more next week. We'll probably dip back to it over the course of the coming weeks because there are a lot of interesting causal possibilities and probabilities mixed into that.
Indeed. Do we have anything else that we need to mention as a housekeeping note?
The one last thing is that the sequel to This Is Spinal Tap is coming out next weekend. And we were talking about how we love talking about stuff that isn't soccer too. And so what Phil and I are going to do is the homework. Oh man, what terrible homework of rewatching the original This Is Spinal Tap from 1984. And we're going to talk about it next week on a bonus episode separate from the main show that we're just going to put in the feed right after the main episode. So if you're going out to see This Is Spinal Tap, The End Continues next weekend, like Phil and I are, you get a little bit of a refresher, even if you don't have time to rewatch This Is Spinal Tap before watching the sequel.
You might remember we did make a Spinal Tap joke at one point,
yes,
which was a reference to soccer. I mean, again, it was something that was in both of our wheelhouses, and there was a relevant moment in the movie that kind of translated over to soccer, which is not the connection that I would say every Austin FC podcast would make, but you know what you're getting when you're getting emergency podcast. You know that you are going to get a little bit of pop culture. You know that you are going to get things that depart a little bit. You know, we are proudly the only Austin FC podcast that has a cold open. And part of the reason we do that is just we like to be a little bit different in our approach. And so, yeah, this is a way to just kind of spread out and all that. And then also a way to additionally support what we are doing here. We'll give you a little bit more details on that as we get into next week. But essentially, we are going to go with the drug dealer ethos. First one's free, right? So you won't have to shell out any additional money, and all of a sudden you will see a strange non-soccery emergency podcast that's coming up here. But yeah, that's what we're going to do. So we're looking very forward to that. I don't know how long it's going to be or how extensive it's going to be, but it's going to be pretty great.
Yeah, we haven't planned anything other than we're excited about it and looking forward to it. And if it seems like a thing we think is sustainable, we know that we got a really solid listener base that'll support it. Because people have asked, is there a way to directly support the podcast? I already pay for the newsletter. And we want to make sure that the podcast is always free and you don't have to worry about that. And if you, for some god-awful reason, you want to hear more of us each month, then fine. If you want that, then the Phil provides and we'll find a way.
And we've only really begun to prep, but I've already been doing Bobby Fleckman. How are ya?
But yeah,
I'm probably gonna try to improve that between now and when we record the episode. But if you know who Bobby Fleckman is, then you probably have watched Spinal Tap. And if you know who portrayed Bobby Fleckman, it's gonna make all kinds of sense. So we'll have little tidbits like that. We'll get into some of the people behind the magic of that movie, and then just also, again, our vantage points. We are different generationally, but we still appreciate that movie very much. I will say that as just a little teaser, I discovered that movie several years after it came out, and it was at a time in my late high school years where I was evolving from a mullet wearing metalhead to somebody into more progressive kinds of music, shall we say. So I was somebody who was really bought into heavy metal, but at the same time I was somebody who was realizing kind of the ridiculousness of heavy metal, which is what a lot of people in Seattle did during that time, which is how grunge happened. So we'll get into some of that a little bit. So a little bit of a departure from soccer, but same kind of analysis. I don't know, maybe some stats. Are there heavy metal stats? Probably. We'll probably get into those.
Yeah, it'll be fun one way or another. And we will learn how grunge was really born from Cousin Phil.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us. That has been very nice of you to do so. We're closing out episode 69. Possibly see you at Sunday at Austin Beer Works. And yeah, we will return next week to talk about the return from the international break that Austin has to play and everything that's going to transpire the rest of September, including a matchup in Frisco.
And the certain denial of Copa Tejas to Frisco. That's what everybody wants. They just don't want Frisco to take it.
Here's hoping. Houston hasn't got it, but at least Frisco will.
Yeah, at least Dallas doesn't. All right.
All we are is dust in the wind, dude.
Be excellent to each other.
This is the best finger I've had in the history of the 8 years I've been on this planet.